Okay, so today is the 8th of August. I have not been able to share as often as I'd like. I was out of town and then I got my inner clock got a little wonky, but I'm sure all four of you care about that. I wanted to share a thought that I was having about the economy of heaven, because I'm sure, as you are aware, there is an election going on right now, and it is a hot mess, but that is for another day. But there's a lot of talk about political views, and whenever I catch wind of political views being discussed, occasionally you'll hear a debate that's either for capitalism or against capitalism. And whenever I hear that, part of me thinks, like, okay, why is this a debate? Not only am I a capitalist, but I don't see what other people see as far as how any other system could work. I mean, I don't know. I guess it comes from a fundamental part of the Christian paradigm about men's nature being flawed and a fallen nature. So they're not going to do the right thing naturally, especially in a population of men need incentive to flourish. So wealth gives the incentive for work. Even in biology, we have sex, which is pleasurable, which gives incentive for us to procreate. Without that, we probably not have more than a generation. I mean, honestly, because children are hard, but procreation is not. So there's already a huge amount of obstacles to kids even getting here. So if sex wasn't pleasurable, we would die. Everybody would be gone. We would have been gone thousands of years ago. Revolution, change gives incentive for that. So even something as simple as that needs incentive. You take away those, and you take away the human's ability to maintain the focus needed to further society. Now, communism would say, well, the government should bear that burden. And that's a great idea if the government was trustworthy. But I don't think any system has worked thus far longer than, I don't know, maybe a generation. No one's come across a fully trustworthy government. So, I mean, unless you count the government that got established in Israel for that brief moment when they had no human king, it was just God giving them the rules and they just followed them. But then eventually they didn't want that anymore. So the only one I can think of in history behind that is America, which I don't know. I'm sure I'm just biased saying that. But for me, early America remains in the top 5 for me, at least. I mean, just the Constitution and the checks and balances that they put in place, having been through Europe and seeing what a hot mess that created. It was airtight for a little bit until it got, corrupted. And then the citizens of America, there was a very educated generation, very hardworking, educated, also very spiritual generation. And that combination was really, created a really, really good crop of human beings. And I know everybody's always like, slavery. But aside from that, the government was great until it got corrupted from the inside. And then all the generations passed that knew anything about what the government was even supposed to be like. And they stopped teaching it in school. So now they can do whatever they want. And no one would even know to protest it, because everybody's not been educated about what it's supposed to be. So that kind of sucks. So everyone's double blind. So that's basically what happens over time, even to the greatest government that's going to be on this earth. And I mean, I suppose on paper, I can start to see how capitalism doesn't look like the best system. Let's all just share the wealth. Like, I see why people would say that if I was a 4-year-old. Let's all share the wealth. Yeah, that'll be cool. We'll just have community cars. No one will own a car. We'll have housing on the honor system and free lunch, and just clock out when you feel like you've gotten the most out of your workday. I mean, that's wonderful. That makes me feel funny and sunny inside as I'm saying it. I want that world. I want to believe that I know enough people that we could get together and really make that a thing. But if you're listening to this video, I'd like to think that you could see the gaping Swiss cheese holes in that perspective without having to really be cynical. And there's nothing wrong with having an innocence and an optimism about what could be on the earth. I mean, one could argue that this was the system that was in place in the beginning. The beginning, according to the Bible, I mean, look at what Genesis 1 says God told Adam. What were the rules? Be fruitful, multiply, govern the earth, reign over the fish of the sea, the birds, the beasts. And that was literally it. I mean, that was his reality. That was the rules. And then, of course, here comes the devil talking about, well, yeah, but don't you want to do some other things? Which brings me to my next point about this whole life really just being a very, very valuable experiment. Most of us wouldn't change our lives or our memories, but we will sell our freedoms, security, and whatever else isn't nailed down just for the promise of some sort of utopia, as we have seen with communism or socialism or even capitalism or whatever other ism. I don't think that when these analysts talk like negatively about the people who are capitalists, I don't think they understand that capitalists don't actually believe in capitalism because we think it will usher in a utopia. I mean, that's not why we believe in capitalism. We believe that utopia cannot be achieved, and that the only thing that will keep this thing in check is capitalism. I can't believe there's still some schmucks out there that think a utopia can really be achieved on this plane. I mean, I'm sure there are some that are pretending like they do so that they can trick the masses into looking forward to it, and just kind of like being like, yeah, with a little bit of ingenuity and elbow grease and education and Obamacare and some, crossbreeding of political systems, maybe some agreed upon religion, maybe that we can all practice and not have any disagreements whatsoever about. Maybe throw in a little eugenics, maybe a lot of eugenics, transhumanism, aliens. I mean, everything is engineered to make us believe that all these things that we do on Earth that we see haven't worked are merely just the old way, and that there's a new way that's coming, a new world order, if you will, that is going to be perfect, a perfect mixture of all that stuff, and it's going to save us from our inevitable destruction. And of course, the 1%ers at the top are the only people who know what that is, and they're going to give it to us, and we're going to be like, oh, thank you. But what's interesting about that deception, which I don't know if you're on the board that is a deception, but it is. But what makes it so successful is the amount of truth that it does contain, and how deep that truth is in our core. Because Every person who's here on earth wants heaven, period. Heaven is in every person's hearts. It's in our consciousness. It's in our DNA, even the atheist, because both we and heaven were made by the same person, God. You know who else was made by God? The devil. So the devil, I think, understands us better than we think he does, because the devil comes up to us and says, probably dressed up as an angel of light or a pretty blonde new age transcendent master, or maybe just as himself to that special ironic goth crowd, and he says, look, you guys want heaven, right? And we're like, oh my gosh, this guy gets me. So he convinces us that he's going to show us how to create a utopia with our own stuff, with our fallen world. And the sad part is that because we're so rebellious or hard of heart or blind or stupid or selfish or whatever pitfall, we fail to just simply walk through the original utopia, which is heaven, which we're actually already a permanent citizen of. The one that God lives in, that he's trying to get us all to go to, and literally died so that we could all go to it. And it's not all just about dying and going to heaven for Christians. I don't know if non-Christians know this. I don't know if actual Christians know this, but our belief system is not just about getting saved, living a decent life so that you can die and go to heaven. There's going to be a generation on earth that's going to see Jesus return. And when he returns, he's going to literally come and chill and live here. Like, he's going to come down to earth and rule and reign for 1,000 years. That's what Revelation says. And what's funny about that is that there's probably some people that would balk at that idea, that think that Jesus coming to be king on earth is just going to be a bunch of forced church services or something. Some people are just like rolling their eyes at the idea of a monarchy. Like, why can't we just elect Jesus? And like, when anyone pictures their ideal leader, living or dead, I don't think anyone even picks Jesus, because we've been programmed over and over to think of him as this meek and mild kind of enigma that has no position of authority and doesn't want it. He's just little old humble shepherd Jesus, who happens to be a moral mastermind from a podunk village in Israel that was killed and maybe appears in dreams and visions, or people have near-death experiences or whatever. But no one thinks of him as a political leader. But Jesus went through the system that we're all going through, and we're all going to get rewards in heaven when we leave here for the good things that we did and the impact that we made in our lives. And Jesus is too. His human existence was a test just like anyone else's that he happened to pass with flying colors. So what's his reward going to be? What's Jesus' reward going to be for that? Well, God is going to pick him to be king of the universe. So that's how that's going to go down. And his first order of business is going to be to come down here and rule and reign for 1,000 years and have the most sickest, gangsterest, badass reign that has ever been by anybody. And some of us are going to be picked to rule and reign with him, but that's neither here nor there right now. And I've heard a lot of stories about people going to heaven, and there does seem to be an economic system up in place up there, because there are people working and doing things either they loved doing here or never got to do here, but not for money, obviously, so there's no capitalism. So relax. I'm not going to try and convince you that there's capitalism in heaven. And everyone, there's common heaven stories across the board. Everyone speaks about how beautiful heaven is and how there's just absolutely no evil that can exist there. So That means there's nothing to regulate, so no socialism. The other thing that people talk about is how abundant everything is. So that means no communism because there's no need to share anything. So what would be the political system of heaven? What's the incentive for society there if it's not one of those? Well, I think the obvious answer to that would be love. A loveocracy. What would you call that? Agapeocracy or something? Can you imagine that? Love being the social system? Love for each other, yeah, but it's different in heaven because God is there. So the common thread is love for one another, but it's mostly the love of God that unites people there. I mean, I'm trying to picture this. Like, you get up in the morning. Well, you don't even do that. I'm already a heretic. You're in heaven. You go into work. Why? Because you love God and you love other people. And it makes you happy to do what you're doing. How long do you do it? I don't know, because there's no time there. Everyone talks about that. You go see your loved ones, hang out with Moses. I mean, it's a big party, but there's a civilization there. It's not just partying for eternity. There's a structure there. And everyone there loves God in whatever measure they've been given and is desperate to please Him and make Him happy and to spend time with Him. So, and I've heard of people who have seen the patriarchs. They've seen Moses or David or whoever, and of course they look awesome, and they're just there helping. They are. I remember one person saying that they saw David, and I don't remember what he was doing, but it was like he was giving like tours or something. It wasn't that, but it was something that you just wouldn't expect someone to say. Like, he's not somewhere on the throne just sitting there being David. He's serving. Because that's what gets everyone going. And that's what Jesus said. He said, the greatest among you will serve. And of course we're like, yeah, he's just totally being like Mr. Miyagi right now, and he doesn't really mean that. Or it's some kind of weird riddle, but he literally meant that. And when you go to heaven, that's clear. Because everybody that loves God the most and wants to please Him the most is serving. Want to do it. Can't wait to do it. It's actually the same thing that fuels Christians here on earth, because we are given the Spirit of God as Christians, but it's obviously different because, like we keep trying to tell people, we are still flawed human beings. So unless it's part of your Myers-Briggsness, as Tim Keller once said, unless it's part of your personality makeup, finding true joy in serving is incredibly hard on earth. And it takes a great accumulation of character most of the time, because sin has made our hearts hard and our eyes blind, and what's up is down and down is up. And God knows that that's hard for us here, which is why He promises us treasure in heaven for those who pursue that as a lifestyle without having ever seen heaven. That is of great worth there as well, because faith is, I've heard some people describe faith as the currency of heaven. So, and not only is love the system, it seems to be the source of celebrity there, because some people are honored over others there. It's not just this equal thing, but it's not the people that you would think. It's not the people that we honor here for whatever reason. In fact, it's almost none of the people that we've ever read about. Sometimes it is, but for the most part, it's super obscure people who lived and died and were buried in unmarked graves, if they were buried at all. and just, loved orphans, or, loved people who were dying or whatever. And they go to heaven and become these great people, and often are given beautiful features if they didn't have it on earth. And which I always think about, because like people describe seeing Jesus and how just kind of amazingly beautiful he is. Not in a shallow way, but they just like describe his beauty. And that used to confuse me for a while when I would read, because in Isaiah it talks about him not having beauty, and it says like he had no beauty to attract us, and nothing that we should desire him. Basically, he was just this kind of plain guy that would just fade into the background if you didn't know him. And when I started to understand that when you go to heaven, it's like the things that are inward, God displays that outwardly on you, and you have these beautiful features. So, and of course, Jesus takes the cake. He's like the most beautiful, gorgeous thing ever. But we really need to grasp that the concepts that are in the Bible are not hyperbole. They're not exaggerations. They're not metaphors. They're not literary devices. And anybody who's teaching that is either trying to deceive people, or they're just in error, because God doesn't need to exaggerate. Okay? God creates things with his words. So he's got to be careful with his words, because when he says something, the universe rushes to make that thing that he said. So he can't exaggerate. He's actually it's kind of like he's incapable of exaggerating, because as soon as he exaggerates, either it's exactly what he says, or he exaggerates, and then the universe becomes that, and will quickly change to be what he said. So what more reason to take him by his word if we're going to understand him fully? Mommy. And he can be understood fully. So anyway, that's my rambling about the economics of heaven. And yeah, so y'all be blessed. I hope I didn't just confuse the crap out of anybody or bore anyone to death. And go with God.